Yeah, it's the only one application that I no folders. Leave the old one. All right.
Segments, what else? Tell me what else.
We are live. We are live.
We'll be operating we'll be operating the Adam, like to show you. Sure. Adam. That's what I said. ان شاء الله ان شاء الله واحد بسرعه
يا مشيد
Who's the moderator? Who's moderator? Moderating. But as we promised, you have 45 minutes. We start 10 minutes late. Can you please finish at 4:55? Next station. Okay, good luck. Hi. Should I stand right here? Why not?
Yes, the mic.
I know.
Distinguished panelists, guests, and delegates, good afternoon. So today we have the pleasure to welcome you to our 8th session, where we bring the scientific research and outcomes of the COP30 simulation to the global stage. I'd like to first welcome our distinguished panelists, Professor Andrea Santos, professor at COP at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and coordinator of the Sustainability Transport Lab at COP in Brazil. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Pedro Jesus, the youth representative at World Scouting. In order to commence our session, I'd like to leave the floor to Dr. Sarah Al-Khishan, the Director of the Strategy Development and the COP Simulation, for her introductory remarks.
Okay. So is the mic working? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, distinguished panel. Good afternoon, students and dear guests. Here again to another session discussing different aspects of the climate problem from the finance point of view, and we'll be also discussing topics related to carbon markets and circular transition, driven by the work of our amazing COP simulation students. But I would like to first deliver some quick messages on the general problem of climate finance inequalities. We have spoken about this in different platforms, but perhaps worth reiterating the message here in this pavilion as well. I'm an economist, passionate economist about finance, international finance, and this intersection between climate finance inequalities, finance inequalities and the climate problem lies at the heart of my interest. And I have always tried to summarize to our students, or whenever we have the chance to speak about this problem, it's about the gap. The climate finance is about the gap between what is pledged and what is implemented, not just in the amounts, but in the types, in the improper allocation, in the improper monitoring of what is being dispersed as, or what is being defined as climate finance. So this is just an overall framing of the problem. So in type, climate finance has been going wrong for years and years, still going wrong, even with different claimed achievements of every COP. So how is it going wrong? The first aspect of going wrong is it's going wrong in the form of size. It's insufficient, and we all agree here that it has not, the promised 100 billion has not been met. The promised first year pledge of the 1.3 overall 1.3 trillion has not been reached for the first year post Baku, so it's still insufficient. The second one is the type of provided finance. Even this disbursed finance has not been in the proper type that the developing countries need to overcome or to progress with their climate agenda and to stop the impacts, for example, the loss and damage impacts on the climate. So please listen to these numbers that I have been, that were developed by important global reports linking that to the climate problem. So we have 60% of low-income countries are now at risk or high risk of debt distress. We have in the recent UNCTAD report on debt mentioning that 3.4 billion people live in countries that are spending more on interest payment than on health and education. Those countries, of course, they do not have the fiscal space to spend on health and education, let alone to spend on advancing climate action or mitigating or adapting to climate change. We have those countries facing borrowing costs that are significantly higher than the borrowing costs in advanced economies. All these figures, put them together with the fact that 70% or more than 2/3 of climate finance is in the form of loans, not concessional finance, given the high borrowing costs, given the high debt services in these countries, all together make the figure clear. Those countries will never advance or achieve their climate goals or be protected from climate disasters if the type of finance stays as it is. More loans, less grants. Noting here that the articles, the Paris Agreement articles that speak about providing concessional finance or mobilizing resources, they have been tilted, or the focus of the multilateral action is taking place more in favor of discussing the mobilization of private resources rather than the advancement with mobilizing public resources. And we see governments washing their hands off their obligations towards providing this fair type of concessional finance. So the second dimension is in the wrong finance, or the third dimension after the size and the wrong type is the wrong allocation. Most of this finance is allocated towards mitigation, which is not the priority of the least and the low income countries and does not meet the prioritized needs for these countries to advance or to sort out their climate problems. So this is the third pillar of the wrong finance, as I like to define it. What about the multilateral actions? What the multilateral action towards this? It is a threat. It is a threat due to several reasons. The first reason is the geopolitics, of course. We see a world that is so heated with wars in our region, in Ukraine, Russia, affecting the fossil fuels, increasing displacements, and a lot of other issues that is making geopolitical context not favoring or not helping advancement with climate action. Another thing is the deviation from multilateral actions. We have seen superpowers withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, refusing multilateralism at its heart. So this is a core threat to achieving the ambitions with regards to climate finance. What COP must deliver is, first of all, facing this problem with bringing people back to the table, to the multilateral actions, speaking more of the need, and here this is a message that we are delivering here, the need to go back to move forward with concessional finance as the main form of development finance for lower income countries, needed rather than the tilt or the skewed favoritism to mobilizing private resources, which is also essential, but the balance between the two is very important. And the last thing is providing the system that the governance that makes sure to operationalize the initiatives that come out of every COP. Here I would like to conclude with something very important. I would like to congratulate COP 30 for the tropical the TFFF facility, that Tropical Forest Finance Framework, a huge achievement, another achievement. However, two things to mention here, and I will close. First thing is that this initiative, such exactly as the Loss and Damage Trust, the Loss and Damage Fund, and other ambitious initiatives, and the 1.3 NCQG, all these initiatives, if they are not complemented with the proper system, proper operationalization, proper monitoring and reporting on the data, it will not end up with proper results. Second thing is also what is mentioned in this initiative is the aspiration is to mobilize 25 billion as public resources compared to 100 billion as private debt. This is another alarming imbalance, and the tilt towards committing to achieve this fund through the mobilization of private resources, not public resources. Again, reiterating the message about the importance of balancing public resources with private resources and concessional debt, as well as other forms of debt. I will stop here and give the chances to our students and the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sara, for the very insightful talk. Now I have the pleasure to leave the floor to our delegates to present their outcomes of the COP simulation.
Hello, I'm Alice. I am going to keep my section of this brief because our lovely two other speakers today, Anne and Yezin, will have a bit more detail on some proposals for you. So, we're going to talk about reframing global mitigation. COP30 2025 marks 10 years since the generation of the Paris Agreement as an idea. It was signed in January of 2016, but in essence, it has been 10 years since the Paris Agreement. Yet global temperatures and our sea levels are still rising, and greenhouse gas emissions haven't seen any significant change that could be directly correlated to the Paris Agreement. There was a drop during 2020, but nobody talks about 2020 anymore. So why is mitigation missing the mark? Inequitable burden sharing. So AOSIS, SIDS and LDCs lack the financial capacity to invest in projects for mitigation and shouldn't have to. Their finances are directed to the most pressing issues in their country, not mitigation for the work of historical emitters, such as the USA. The second one is, as Dr. Sarah mentioned, voluntary financial pledges. They're not meeting the voluntary targets they have set themselves. And the fact they are voluntary prevents predictable and lower risk funding for mitigation projects across the globe. Finance is a critical thing for both mitigation and adaptation, yet the current financial streams are hindering mitigation and adaptation efforts, but this is specifically on mitigation. And finally, economic, political and social constraints. Many economies are dependent on high emission sectors, so need to embed those principles of just transition into into these industries. As I mentioned earlier, they need to prioritise national issues such as responding to natural disasters and in some cases repaying debts. There is lobbying against mitigation and adaptation efforts. There is a focus on short-term policy, and there are social fears regarding job losses, increased energy prices, and climate change denial. So I will give the floor to Anne.
Okay. Yes. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Anne, and I will be talking about the spirit of mutual. So I'm sure everybody has heard about mutual by now. So it is a Brazilian concept, and it encourages collective action through communities working together, as opposed to just individuals or just leaving it to governments to negotiate. So it's from this spirit of mutual that we have these three proposals. And the first one is the youth monitoring, reporting, and verification teams. So currently in carbon markets, one of the problems that we're having is greenwashing. And we have projects where we can't really verify if the emission reductions have happened. We have satellites that sometimes are missing the reality of what's happening on the ground. And sometimes we have communities that cannot even truly verify the impact of carbon finance and climate results that supposedly are supposed to come from this carbon finance. So one of the solutions that we're proposing is to allow youth to do the verification, so train them on the verification standards, make sure that we are encouraging them to be effective guardians for carbon markets, and give them the technology that they need for this verification so that we have a generation of youth that understands climate and carbon verification. The next solution is to have 90-day pipeline studios. So we don't have a lot of time, and how traditional projects run right now is that they take years and years. And we have a looming deadline with the 1.5 degrees Celsius that, we are trying not to exceed. So our suggestion here is to have intensive design sprints where we compress the process from idea to implementation in a 90-day period of time. And we have stakeholders like youths, technical experts, and communities just working together simultaneously to lead climate initiatives. Then the third proposal we have is community accords. So these are binding local agreements that ensure that these mitigation projects are actually benefiting the communities themselves. So that looks like a percentage of the credit revenue going back to the communities, local hiring jobs to the same communities, providing environmental safeguards. So then we shift the governance from a top-down to a bottom-up governance approach where communities are holding these projects accountable and they are equal partners and not just consultants. So I will leave it to my colleague to conclude. Thank you.
There is an old saying in the United States, which is that a problem shared is a problem halved. Applying this here with Muturao follows the logos and ethos of that statement. It is when an individual comes together and communicates, anything can be overcome. So applying that here, the blueprints and documents given freely and without borders would help support other communities. An example of this is going to be through Mutual, and I have one right here. It is at first a 90-day studio designs the community solar project, making sure that the technology fits and fits the community's need. Month 2, the community itself negotiates the accord, guaranteeing that a large portion of the energy is free for local families and ensuring that jobs are created to stay within the community. And finally, a youth MRV team steps in to monitor the progress and keep everyone accountable. This doesn't stop after implementation. The entire process becomes an open playbook, a blueprint any community can use to launch their own projects starting from scratch. The power of Mutual is simple. When everyone contributes a piece, mitigation becomes faster, fairer, and genuinely scalable. And most importantly, youth aren't treated as passive beneficiaries. They're co-creators driving climate solutions from the ground up. So in conclusion, the message is clear. Global mitigation will only accelerate when it becomes something communities can build together. Over 10 years after Paris, emissions haven't fallen because systems have remained slow, and Mutual offers a different model, one where youth, communities, and local innovators are co-creators of solutions rather than waiting for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our delegates. Now I have the honor to give the floor to Professor Andrea Santos for her reflections.
Thank you very much. Let me stay here. It's better to see everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here again. This is the second session that I'm attending. And it's one of the crucial for example. Yeah. Regarding the carbon markets and circular transitions, youth leadership is redefining climate ambitions, shifting the debate from incremental mitigation toward transformative, also justice-centered solution that link carbon markets with, for example, real social and environmental integrity. I would like to remind that Brazil in the past, when we were negotiating the Kyoto Protocol, was one of the countries that designed the idea of the clean development mechanism, the CDM. And now when you talk about Article 6 and the carbon markets, we are using all this experience, including technical methodologies, to avoid double accounting, for example. That is really critical. Another aspect that I'd like to highlight here today is also the mechanism. When you talk about this kind of mechanism related to markets, it's important to empower communities, protect ecosystems, and channel resources to the global south. It's another unbalanced scenario that we have right now, and that we need to give the appropriate resources and finance to global south to do the transition. And we understand that global south has a huge opportunity to implement mitigation actions, especially developing countries. And also, youth are catalyzing global cooperation, pushing for markets that reward regenerative practices, supporting just transitions, and align with long-term climate resilience rather than short-term gains. This is another aspect that I would like also to bring today. And when you talk about mitigation actions, we see that if you don't accelerate and also scale up all the projects that we are, for example, identifying in Brazil recently, I guess it was on Saturday, create a coalition for carbon markets. And now we have 18 countries that is part of this coalition. So this is an example of a movement that we can encourage other countries, parties, to accelerate this. I believe that when you talk about carbon markets, we cannot consider only financing business, but also the transformation that we need in the societies and considering social aspects. This is another topic that in the CDM in the past, in the Kyoto Protocol, we had to consider as additional. The additionality must be considered if you are giving social improvement, for example, for local communities. So, and as a part of the COP30 simulation, I'd like again to thank you all for this opportunity, and I enjoy to stay with you, and I hope to see more debate about this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your very insightful remarks. I now have the honor to leave the floor for Mr. Pedro Jesus for his insights.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the COP30 simulation for having me, and thank you, Dr. Sala, to moderate this session. You know, I am youth, I have 20 years old, and I want to share about a linkage. Ooh, no worries. The link with the global mutirão, with the youth participation spaces that we have in the climate finance in the international level, and how we can connect this with the mitigation. I am a youth representative of the World Organization of the Scout Movement. And the World Organization of the Scout Movement have a no formal education approach where we bring young people across the world with tools and knowledge about climate change. We made this with a global program called Scouts for SDGs. And this global program, we have one initiative called Hearth Tribe. At Hearth Tribe, we have some badges where the young people have access to knowledge and to develop community engagement projects and to tackle the climate change with their communities. And this is important because when we talk about the connection with the youth participation and youth leadership and the mitigation process, we have like youth across the world. We are like 57 million scouts across the world. We're developing projects like reforestation and bring projects with circular economy to exactly provide for the next generation or for actually the our generation exactly the our generation a new future of hope because this no formal education approach wants to bring reflection thoughts and basically tools to these young people get involved in the international level. And when we talk about climate finance, especially, we are looking for, as World Organization of the Scout Movement, funding for providing fund for these programs to provide climate education for the young people with connection with the schools, family, and build capacity building of the young people to bring greening skills. That means bringing youth engagement skills like leadership, how I can do a community project, and but for to do these things we need funding, and we need to build this capacity building internally at the World Scouting. And this is a challenge because we don't have like so many stakeholders in the scenario who are interested to provide funding for these initiatives. And especially at this point of view, the Global Mutirão provide for the youth across the world, the youth across the world, the chance to join a task force to develop these projects at local level. This is my first remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, this is very insightful, and I just have a couple of comments. Of course, not on the students' work. We have been developing this together, but on what you, Professor Andreas said, and Mr. Pedro as well. And they are interconnected, by the way, and they lie also at the heart of the values of the COP simulation model. First, I want to say with regards to the Coalition of Carbon Markets, this is very interesting initiative, and I'm really interested personally to know more about it and to see how we can join forces on that, how we can be engaged, because yes, beyond the finance, Egypt started its work on carbon markets through the voluntary carbon markets, still developing. We have it at the Financial Regulatory Authority, and a lot of work is being done on that front. Also, the Ministry of Finance is working on that, and we are developing the green taxonomy, and there is a lot of work that is being done, still at the first stages, but I think we are developing. However, beyond the governments, beyond the even beyond the negotiations that are taking place about the CBAM and the carbon markets, there is a role for the society, there is a role for the academia, and there is a role for youth as the mentioned initiatives perhaps to complement the work and to support the accountability in the system, avoid double counting. As you said, capacity building here is very important. So if this coalition provides a space for capacity building, for peer learning, for exchanging knowledge, we're so happy to contribute in the way that you can provide us with more information about that. So this is the first thing. About the role of the youth and engaging the youth, we do believe, so this simulation is about simulating the COP through negotiation rooms and research and developing solutions in a context that is so much close to the real COP. However, we are developing and growing it in terms of size and impact and also modules of work. So we are trying to develop it into, expand it into a bigger program that would have a module or a pillar that involves youth, civil society activities in communities and societies. So very much welcome is your ideas and efforts, and I invite you also to perhaps coordinate with our colleagues here for how we can take this forward, and of course you can be part of our space and community on that front. Those are my two remarks, and if there is any comments from the floor, please be welcome, or from our students. Any questions, any comments? All right, so I'll hand it to Rita.
Thank you very much for our distinguished panelists. Now I invite you all to the floor to take a group picture.